My father never wanted me to be a fisherman, but my grandfather, my uncles and my father are all fishermen, and I've always looked up to them. When my father stopped waking me up to go fishing with him, it devastated me as a young fella. I made a film last year called Teach a Man to Fish, which was basically about me returning home to Taree to reconnect with my father through learning the family business of professional fishing. In that film, we touched on some politics that have hindered small family fishing businesses, but I just wanted to now explore a little bit more of those issues because it's important, not just for Dad and other small fishing families, but for you, the fresh local seafood consumer, because you have a right to know the future of this industry and our precious resource. Yes, this is a subjective film from the perspective of generational fishing families like ours, but you deserve to know our truth, and here it is.
I've always thought of fishing as an equal opportunity, the way it's structured now, that it was an equal opportunity with the 125 shares. When those shares are increased by other fishermen and they have more traps or more days to work, they can bomb you out.
In November of 2015, the government decided to put amendments through to change the regulations and the Act, the Fisheries Management Act of 1994, so that they didn't trigger compensation. Those changes meant that they put in place a plan, which was an amended plan, which should have been a new plan, because a new plan would have meant that they would have had to have had a social economic impact statement done or study done. They would have had to have an environmental study done. They would have had to do all these things, but they didn't want to do them because they didn't want to put the money out. So what they decided to do was say, okay, we're going to have a commercial fishing adjustment program. We're going to put $16 million on the table, and we're going to get the fishermen to buy their jobs back.
It's crippled us.
Yeah.
You know, we've had to buy more shares. I've had to buy 2 more lots of shares for the crabbing, for instance, and we're still only on 93 days for fishing, like on for mashing.
Yeah.
You know, so you need another at least 1 or 2, but where do you purchase it?
Yeah.
And why are we buying our business back?
They kept on saying, well, they're not buying their jobs back because they're buying an investment into the future of their industry. But what they didn't tell people was that unless you had money, you really didn't have a hope of getting the primary species that you needed. When we went into the share trading, we were faced with bidding over $200,000 to buy our jobs back. There was 3 rounds in the market. Round 1, we were faced with bidding over $200,000. Round 2, my husband was faced with bidding just under $200,000. For mud crabs alone, my son was faced with bidding $166,000 to get back to his status quo. That's not earning any more money, that is just getting back to what he normally earned. He failed. He didn't get his shares.
The subsidised market system that all fishermen participated in, including myself, I was matched with a buyer in round 1 and round 2, and I was asked to reduce the amount that I was asking for in those 2 rounds, and so New South Wales Fisheries weren't willing to pay the subsidy to make the difference for my endorsements to be bought off me. And then I had no match in the 3rd round. But when the market system finished, New South Wales Fisheries contacted me and wanted to buy my beach hauling endorsement from me at $5,000. Well, the price that I was asking for in the market system was $30,000.
Now, just to clarify things, each fisherman has a business number, and on that business number they hold endorsements and shares in a diversity of fish species, including but not limited to crabs, prawns, estuary fish or beach fish. Fishermen need to diversify because if one species isn't producing like prawns aren't at the moment, a fisherman needs to catch something else in order to survive. The shares in each endorsement or species equate to quotas in the amount of species that can be caught or catch quota, and amount of days they can work that species or effort quota. Before the share market system was put in place, fishermen were told that if they wanted out of the industry, they could put their businesses on the market, which was a bit like an auction, at a value that they thought it was worth, or sell endorsements that they no longer needed, or shares in those endorsements, and buyers could bid with sellers accepting or not. They were also told that buyers, including fishermen, wanting to remain viable in this new industry, would receive a government subsidy to buy those businesses or endorsements or shares. Now, Dad no longer wanted his beach hauling endorsement. He hasn't beach hauled for over 4 years. And he had a buyer willing to pay what it was worth, but the government wouldn't subsidise that buyer, as promised. And as a consequence, Dad lost that buyer and had to settle for a much lower figure after the market had finished.
Because the government was a player in this market. The government was putting the subsidy in. And the government had $16 million, supposedly, less the buyouts that had already taken place, which left them with around 14 million. The government didn't use the 14 million. In fact, the government used less than 25% of the money allocated in round 1. Then they used less than 50% in round 2. They didn't tell anybody that, but their movers and shakers, the people who have share investors that are advising the minister, the people who are sitting on committees in the Sydney fish markets, those people knew that the subsidy was not going to kick into the last round. But the rest of the fishermen, the ordinary fishermen out there, didn't know. They weren't told. So we know absolutely that the government decided who they would tell. They chose who the winners were going to be, and those people knew. So if you were going into a market and you were faced with bidding $351 a share, and you needed 487 shares, and then the next round you were faced with bidding $341 a share for 487 shares, which comes to $166,000. You'd be sitting there scratching your head thinking, what in the hell are you going to do in round 3? But if someone had said to you, oh well, the subsidy's not there yet, if someone had said, well, the subsidy's not there, you could take a chance and you could bid the 341, and when the hammer goes down, well, it's not going to be 341, it's going to be 110. That's exactly what happened.
There's plenty of fish at the Sydney market, but according to a new report commissioned by the state government, there's not enough in the sea.
Look, it's not good and it's not a rosy future.
And that's because there's too many fishermen. Some run big businesses, but many are marginal, and some want to retire but can't because there isn't a share trading system. The government has allocated $16 million to overhaul the industry. Fishers can now put in a tender to sell their shares in return for a lump sum payment.
The share market system was sold to the public as a means of reducing the amount of fishing and its impact on fish stocks. What the public wasn't told, however, is that while yes, it reduced the number of fishermen who couldn't afford the shares, those shares didn't go with them. Those shares just went to wealthier fishermen or businessmen who could afford them. And instead of reducing the impact on fish stocks, all that has changed is that sustainable, generational fishermen have either lost their jobs or are struggling to keep them.
Some people won the lottery at the expense of many, many fishermen going to the wall. And when you have $2 million to $2.5 million, which includes $1.5 million of hard cold cash to 4 fishermen, one of them or 2 of them took buyouts and then brought back in, and then you have another fisherman who fraudulently signed documents in the share trading market, receiving almost $1 million. You've got serious, serious issues. And then there's almost $1 million worth of shares that were bought by the government that have gone missing. And when I touched base with one of the senior managers the other day on the phone about it, he said they haven't gone missing. They couldn't possibly go missing. I said, well, they've gone missing. He said, well, they couldn't possibly be gone. And then his answer to that was, well, they could have been bought by the government. Well, when were they going to tell us that the government was going to be in competition with us? My husband tried to buy hand gathering shares in the market and we weren't successful. We did not know that the minister, the government were going to be buying those shares, and they were in competition for us. And in that competition, they were paying $2,656 a share. Well, we were bidding $70. Do you think we were ever in there with a chance? And the results are now that many, many fishermen are going to the wall. Some of them have already gone to the wall and they've had to sell. And some of these people indeed went and got advice. They went to a solicitor, and the solicitor's advice was, do not touch this market because it's illegal what they're doing. So those people decided not to go in. So those people who didn't go in were left. And they don't even figure into any of this because the department have decided, well, if you didn't go into the market and try to buy your shares, then we figured that you were all okay. Now, I know a chap who's down south. He cannot go to work because he doesn't have the amount of shares necessary to go to work. There's another chap down there who only has 75 days to work, that's it. Got nothing else. 75 days, once he's used up his 75 days, he has to go and start milking cows. He's in his late 50s, or he has to line up a Centrelink. Now this government has decided, well, we're not going to help you. We're not going to do anything for you. It's tough, just tough. You know, you just got to go and do what you got to do, and if you haven't got enough days, well, that's not our problem. We don't care what you do.
You have to be bloody disgusted with yourself, you politicians and cotton grower manipulators. It's bloody atrocious.
This is nothing to do with drought. This is a man-made disaster brought to you by the New South Wales government, the federal government and the Murray-Darling Authority, Basin Authority. This is the result of draining the Menindee Lakes twice in 4 years and killing the system. This fish is 100 years old. It's never coming back. This is bloody disgraceful.
Absolutely.
You know, the fact that I'm the Minister of today, there's been many decisions over the years, but we need to, you know, this community deserves the fact that I've turned up to listen to the concerns, the feedback, the criticisms, and that's what I'm here to do today.
Noel Blair is in the paper this morning about the Murray-Darling Basin and the fish kill. And he is trying to explain away all accountability to the New South Wales government. He's saying that they're going to do their own report, their own study, and it will be based on fact and not political scoring points. How that man can say that, I will never know, because this man does reports, cherry picks various statements out of reports. They will ask that report to be redone. They will ask for it to be less politically sensitive. They will change it. They will even go to the point of changing minutes. They will have 5 or 6 goes to get the minutes of a meeting the way they want it to read, regardless of what actually happened in the meeting. That's how far this government will go. And one of the things that they've instigated across the state, which even the environmental groups don't know, the conservation groups don't know about, and nobody knows about except the fishermen who are affected, is that you can buy in your quota. So here we are sitting here at Wallace Lake Fishermen's Co-op, and we've got this beautiful lake which is owned by the New South Wales people, and in particular this community here. Now, we could have if there was a bumper year, we could have someone buying quota from Tweed Heads who's not having a bumper year. So in other words, if they have, say, the white spot disease up there on their mud crabs, which they've got in Queensland, we could maybe buy in all that quota from Tweed Heads, and it could all come down here, and then we could buy in all the quota from Region 3, and it could all come here. And what is that going to do? Nobody's worked it out. Now, in 2001, they decided to have regions, and the reason they did that was because of the economics and to keep the money in the community. So, someone could come in here, buy all the mud crab shares. They could be someone sitting in a little Chinese restaurant in Sydney, or they could be exporting it to, you know, doesn't matter where, they could be exporting it anywhere. And they give licenses to people who are not real people. They have no ABN, they have no tax file number, Medicare card number. I mean, you know, it's almost tempting to get a license and call it Bugs Bunny. And they don't check. There's no checks. As long as they've got an address, so we're not protected from foreign investment as far as our seafood is concerned. Anybody could come in and buy up all of the mud crab quota right now. We could have Mr. Woolworths and Mr. Wong's, they could buy up all the mud crab quota and sit on it for the next 5 years and say, well, we don't want anybody else to have it but us, and we're just going to wait for everybody to go broke. They have not mitigated any of these things whatsoever.
With my fish hauling in the river, I've been cut back to 60 days a year, whereas I had 200 to 300 days a year fish hauling. So dropping back to 60 days, I now have to target more expensive fish to utilise the amount of working days that I have. Before, I had ample days and I could target all species of fish in an estuary system and feed the whole lot of the community. Now I'm excluding, by the way I have to operate my business now, I'm excluding the poorer people, and I don't like that.
I mean, seriously, this is so bad. And as I said, I'm quite happy to sit with anybody who's interested, to show them what I've done. But we can't get, we just don't seem to be able to get anybody to listen to us. But people have got a right to be angry, and people are angry. We have a right to be heard, and everyone has a right to be compensated for any loss that they've had. And nobody has a right to be walking around with a lottery win while other people are on their knees. This co-op relied on those fishermen to be able to get those shares to keep this co-op doors open. Those shares have not gone here. That money has not gone here. Why is that? When a fisherman and his brother both got 720 shares in the market at the tune of $655,000 worth of subsidy, and now have offloaded those shares, the majority of those shares, to his business partner, who took a buyout. And his business partner received just under $600,000 and received 610 of the 720 shares that these people bought. This is wrong. It's wrong. And someone needs to do something.